What's up, guys? Welcome to the Dad Edge podcast. I'm Larry Hagner. I am your host and founder of this show, and thank you so much for being here. Also, welcome to 2020. This is the first Dad Edge podcast of 2020, and this year the podcast turns 5 years old, so we're kind of in kindergarten, I guess, at this point. The show I have for you guys, I'm going to start out with a question today, and that question is, do you know what percentages of divorces actually end up in divorce due to financial issues? And no, it's not 50%. Yes, the divorce rate is 50%, but 70% of that 50% is due because of financial issues. It's no secret that financial issues and stress cause more stress and they wreak more havoc and issues when it comes to marriage than any other issue there is. I think a close second is probably sex and intimacy or lack thereof. So several years ago, Gary Chapman wrote the book, The 5 Love Languages. And if you haven't read that book, it's an amazing book, and it will literally change the way that you interact as a married couple, because people have one or two, a primary love language and a secondary. And once you understand what your wife or your spouse, her love language and how she receives love, it's a lot easier to love her in that way and to give her what she needs. And guess what? The same goes for you. If she knows how you need to be loved, it makes that relationship a whole lot easier. Just a quick example. My wife is acts of service and quality time. I am physical touch and words of affirmation. So we are literally the complete opposite when it comes to our love language. But now that I know that about her, she knows that about me, it's much easier for us to love each other in that way. Also, so my guest today wrote a book, and it's about the 5 money personalities. And my guest today is Scott and Bethany Palmer, and they have 15 years together as of love and money experts. This has been their mission for the past 15 years, and their passion is to save marriages from the number one killer, and that is money issues. Their passion really came from being financial advisors themselves. They have a combined 50 years of experience as financial advisors, and they got sick and tired of seeing their clients who were married split up over financial issues. So they went full steam with this mission. They've really dove into the research. They really know what they're doing. They've been doing it for the past 15 years. They are best-selling authors of, one book is called The 5 Money Personalities. Another book is The 5 Money Conversations to Have with Your Kids, and we even get into that as well. They've been featured on Good Morning America, Fox News, CNN, HLN, Hallmark, Forbes, US News, World Report, Women's Health and Prevention. So the 5, you're probably scratching your head like, well, okay, what are these 5 personalities? We're going to go over them in depth on today's show. One is the spender, one is the saver, one is the risk taker, one is the security seeker, and one is the flyer. What this show is really going to do for you is when you're done with this particular show, you're really going to understand, maybe from a 30,000 foot level, what type of personality you have just based on the descriptions. Not to mention, you're going to understand how to better interact with your spouse as it pertains to their money personality, because another interesting statistic is 80% of us are married to the opposite personality. Hence, 70% of the divorce rate of the 50%, I'm throwing out a lot of percentages, but 70% of the divorces are due to financial issues. So it's like literally right in line with that 80% of us are married to our complete and total opposite as it pertains to our money personality. So this show is packed with all kinds of knowledge. What you're going to get at the end of this show, Scott and Bethany actually have a free assessment, just like the 5 love languages has a free test, so you understand what your love language is and the love language of your spouse. You're also going to be able to take a test at the end of the show. There will be a link in the show notes for you. You go take a test and figure out what your money personality is, and you can have your wife take it. And guess what? You're going to have your kids take it. I had my kids take it. I'm not going to get into that now. Fascinating, very, very fascinating stuff. But the cool thing is when you understand this knowledge, you finally understand, like, okay, now I understand where I'm wired, and I understand where my spouse is wired, and you understand each other's needs better. And this could be literally the stepping stone of really understanding and creating a vision for what you want your financial life to look like as a married couple. But before we do that, here's the iTunes review of the week. Hey, thank you so much for that iTunes review. I really, really appreciate it. Guys, we're going to make this a great year. We're going to make 2020 a financial success in our marriages this year. We're going to start it with this show right here, right now. Scott and Bethany, money. How are you guys?
We're doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm
Good.
glad to have you guys on talking about the almighty dollar and marriage. Done a lot of homework on you guys. You guys are obviously, you guys are geniuses when it comes to this good stuff, but it didn't come easy, right?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely
Right.
not. But we sure are glad to be with you today.
Glad to have you guys on. This is a huge topic. Anytime we have anything financially focused on the podcast, the downloads are huge. So obviously, this is a big deal. Before we get into your book and everything that you guys do, why don't you just share with the audience just some context of how did you guys meet?
Okay. Well, actually, our dads were business associates, and Bethany and I were actually really good friends. So we were really good friends for 6 years before we ever went on a date. And I was actually engaged to be married to somebody else, and she had a serious boyfriend, and both those relationships ended. And about 3 years later, we were like, hey, we should date. And we started dating, and that was that.
The rest is history.
All right. So I didn't think that was how y'all met, but how did they take to this? Were they like, yeah, good, awesome? Or were they like, hey, man, we need to have talks over lunch about what the rules are with these kids?
Get the napkin out with the 10 points, that kind of thing. Yeah.
No, it was pretty smooth sailing, actually. They kind of left us alone and kind of let our do our own thing. I think they were both fairly pleased with the decision because it kept the family business rolling.
Absolutely. Well, it was really kind of neat. So I would come out to Colorado Springs on business. And I had my dad had suggested that I go out to lunch with his dad because his dad was a CPA in town. And so I actually went out to lunch with his dad before I went out to lunch with him. And I really thought his dad was great. And one time my car was broken down in the city, and I didn't live in Colorado Springs, so I didn't know anybody. And this is like pre-cell phones. So I was like trying to find a payphone. I don't even know if any of your listeners know what a payphone is. Anyway, and I found one, and the only person I really knew in town to call was his dad. So I called his dad, and he said, well, I'm not available to pick you up, but actually my son's here. He'd be more than happy to. And so he did. And the rest is history from that point on. Actually, I thought it was so great. And I was dating somebody else at the time that I set him up with.
Psycho.
A girlfriend of mine, which didn't turn out very well. And then I broke up with my boyfriend, and he moved out to California, and we started dating there and dated for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And then when we did get married, we decided to move out to Colorado Springs. We thought that was a good place to raise a family and do our financial advising, because that's what we both did at the time, was financial advisors.
Right. So did you ever find out, Scott, was it actually like a chess move on your dad's part to be like, I'm not available. Actually, I have the entire afternoon free, but I'm not available. I'm going to send my son to go get you.
I don't think so. I think really, honestly, he was, I was working at the office at that time, and he just walked in my office and said, hey, you need to go pick up Bethany, her car is broken down. And I said, okay, and grabbed my stuff and took off. But I don't think it was really, because we lived in different places. So I think in my dad's mind, he was just making me go do something that he didn't have time to do. But it worked out great. I'm thankful for it, to say the least.
I mean, that's destiny right there.
Absolutely.
That is exactly what it is.
It was kind of fun. I was actually in an office building and where I found the phone to use. And he was actually I didn't know what he looked like or anything. So he was kind of standing in the front, and I walked out to go kind of wait for him out in the front of the building. And I walked by this guy, and I remember thinking, oh, he's pretty cute. And then it turned out that he was the guy. So, it's fun.
It all worked out.
It all worked out.
Obviously it worked out. And not only that, but you guys are doing just great things. I mean, your book, The 5 Money Personalities, Speaking the Same Love and Money Language. And I know you guys shared a scary statistic before we got started today. And I've heard you mention it actually on other podcasts and in your book, that the divorce rate's 50%. Everyone knows that, but 70% of those divorces are due to finances.
Yeah,
well,
money conflict.
It's due to money conflict, really. And there is a big difference between financial planning and just day-to-day money talk. And day-to-day money talk, there's just a lot of bickering and fighting going on about that. And that's what actually ends up eroding the marriage, is because just on those day-to-day money kind of decisions, they just don't agree. As a matter of fact, we had this couple that about, I don't know, maybe 3-4 weeks ago telling us this story, and we were like, that is exactly what happens in most marriages. And what had happened to them is, we live in Colorado Springs, so we live near the Aspens, and a lot of times people go up to the mountains for the day and look around at the beautiful Aspens. Well, there was this couple, and they were all excited. They were going to go up to the mountains. And right before they left, he said, you know what, let's stop. I've got to get some gas in the car, put some gas in the car. And she's like, okay. So she goes, and she's sitting there, and he gets out of the car to go put gas in the car, and she peeks over her shoulder, and she notices that he's putting in high grade gas into the car. And she's thinking, why is he putting high grade gas in the car? That's a waste of money. And then she thought, hey, wait a minute. He always puts gas. He puts gas in my car too. Is he always putting high grade gas in the cars? That is just stupid. And so she's thinking this. Then he walks over, and he kind of peeks his head in the car and says, hey, honey, I'm going to go in and get something to drink. Do you want anything? And she's like, no. So he closes the door, and he goes out to go to the convenience store and to get something to drink. And she is thinking to herself, well, now, wait a minute. Does he always get something to drink at the convenience store? I mean, we had stuff at home. Why didn't he just get something there? Why is he wasting his money going into the convenience store and getting stuff there? Meanwhile, he's in the store, all kind of happy and giddy. And he's like, I know she said she didn't want anything, but I'm going to get her some drinks and some snacks, and we're going to have so much fun driving up to the mountains. He comes back into the car, sits all the stuff down on the console, and she's like, I told you I didn't want anything. And why did you buy something in there? I mean, we have drinks and snacks at home. What a waste of money. Do you always, and by the way, do you always put high grade gas in the car? And he's like, yes, I always do. It makes our car last longer. So all of a sudden, they're planning on this really nice day, and it's a total fight. Totally starts out as a fight. Now, if she was talking to her friend, she might tell her friend, you know what, we were supposed to have this great day, but we ended up arguing about gas and, candy bars and drinks. But did they really argue about gas and candy bars and drinks? No. They argued about the foundational issue in their relationship and their differences in how they spend money. And there's so many times, and you can just imagine this kind of scenario, maybe in your relationship of your listeners out there, but it can play itself out in so many different ways. It can play itself out in going out to eat or not, or putting your child into a competitive team, what do they call it?
Like a
club sports versus the Y sports. I mean, those differences can come up in almost just about every conversation that you have. And it's those arguments and those fights that are happening all around the country, all around the world that are tearing our relationships apart. And not even to mention the fact that most of the time those arguments happen in front of kids. And then now you're starting to model a bad marriage to your kids because you're arguing about it.
That's why I use just regular unleaded. Yeah. I just want to avoid all that madness.
I go medium grade.
Yeah. I mean,
but it's just so amazing to us how many times these kind of differences pop up, and they pop up all the time. And that's what's starting these arguments. And it's interesting when it comes to kind of your perspective of money, everybody thinks that their way is the right way. Like he thought in that particular story, he thought that his way was the best. It made the cars last longer. It was going to give us more fun because we're going to have something to eat and drink as we're driving and looking at the beautiful aspens. Whereas she thinks she's right. She thinks she's the more responsible one because she's thinking of ways to save money. So what happens is you both think you're right, so you both dig your heels in even deeper into the sand, and you really want to convince the other person that they're wrong. And that's where kind of the fights really start and escalate.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Can you guys hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah,
sure.
Okay,
great. Cool. I just wanted to make sure because I'm not coming through my earbuds anymore, but that's all right. Yeah, and here's the other challenge too. None of us are really taught this growing up. Like there's not, hardly anyone that I've ever met has taken a course in high school or even college on personal finance. So when it comes to, you and I, we started talking about the 5 dimensions that this podcast, this community focuses on, which is finances, optimal health, legendary marriage, parenting, and business. And if you think about those 5 elements, they are literally the things that we get the least amount of training on. Like I know obviously more, you can go and buy a course on like podcasting, right? And if you're a podcaster, of course you want to go out and learn everything you possibly can about podcasting, and whether it's the equipment and the flow of the show and voice tone and all these things. But when it comes to things like personal finance or marriage or parenting, there's not a plethora of resources out there, and it's almost like, oh hey, yeah, go figure it out. I'll use this last analogy, and this probably pertains to you guys in your world of finances. It's like when you get married, or even when you enter the adult world of finances, it's almost like if you were going to go be a cop. And it was almost like if the cop was, or if there was no police academy that was offered to be a cop, it's like, hey, I'm here to, go through a year or whatever of training to be a cop. And they're like, oh yeah, we don't do that anymore. Just head down to the station. We're going to give you a badge and a gun and a uniform and a squad car. You're going to go out and fight crime. And best of luck. Hope it works out. And that's the same thing with finances, it seems like, especially when you are in a relationship. And I've heard you guys say this before, that 80% of us are married to the opposite money personality that we are, which is interesting, right? Which probably lends to the fact that we have 70% of the divorces are due to that money conflict.
Absolutely. I think there's a couple things at play. I think the first thing at play is that we are told that if we have the perfect cash flow, if we have the perfect budget, if we're paying our house off early, if we're saving for retirement, if we're doing all those little box checks that we're supposed to do because that's what whatever course we took told us to do, that suddenly if we're doing all those things, we're going to have this great marriage and we're just going to be able to manage our finances. And you're right in that it doesn't work for everybody that way. Maybe for 30% of the population, if they're checking boxes, both the people in the relationship are going to be happy, or maybe one of the two of the people in the relationship are going to be happy. But the reality is, the first reality is that we've bought into this mindset that if we check all these boxes, we're going to be on the same page and we're going to get along about finances. Absolutely not true. The second thing is, you're absolutely right. We always say at first opposites attract, and then you get married and opposites attack. And that is so true, especially when it comes to your finances, because who we are financially is part of our DNA. It's not because our parents taught us one way as compared to another way. It's not because we took this course and now we're going to be this perfect financial person, whatever that even means. But what it does mean is that who we are and what our DNA is, it really dictates to us how we look and view money. And yes, we are married. 80% of all the couples that have taken our money personality assessment are married to their money opposite. One of the things that we have to understand also is there's no right money personality. There's no wrong money personality. You are who you are. And that's really going to dictate how you look at money. So like this couple that we were counseling through this situation in the car, he didn't technically do anything wrong. And she didn't technically do anything wrong. She was worried about the price of gas, and she was worried that he spends their money on what she would deem as frivolous things in the gas station. Is there anything right or wrong with that? No, it's just different than his thought process. His thought process is, yeah, I'm going to put upper grade gas in my car because I want it to last as long as possible. And I'm hungry. I'm going to go get some food. So he's thinking she's mad at me about gas and food. And she's thinking basically I'm mad at him because of gas and food. Money didn't even kind of come on their radar. And so what we find when we're counseling couples and working with couples is that you have to think differently. And part of thinking differently is understanding who you're married to and then being okay with who you're married to. The reason that 70% of all divorces over finances is because what the thought process in that was they were always wrong about money and they weren't willing to come over to my side. And one of the things that Bethany and I have really worked on, because our marriage hasn't always been smooth sailing. When we first got married, I was raised with a bunch of brothers. There's 28 grandsons in my family, no granddaughters in my family. So we don't make girls. So I basically grew up in a very predominantly male environment. And suddenly I'm getting married to a woman who thinks different, acts different. I didn't get mad at her for being a woman. I just said, yeah, this is part of the package. They just think differently than we do. So in some areas of our relationship, we're willing to give. But when it comes to money, we are not good at compromising as couples. And part of that is because it is who we are. It's our DNA. So you don't think differently than me when it comes to money. You think wrong when it comes to money. And that's how we feel. And what we have to do is get it away from the wrong to the just different. And then how do we compromise and move together in this relationship to be better spouses, to be better business partners, to be better dads? I mean, how do we model for that for our sons and for our daughters? Is that it's not okay when mom and dad fight, and it's not okay when mom and dad fight about money in front of you. That's an adult topic that we need to learn to take to another room and to another degree of communication so that it's better for our kids.
And just smack the microphone.
And then boom.
Yeah. And then just hit the microphone.
Well, it's interesting because there's this couple and just to show you how, this example of arguing in front of your kids, they went out to eat and they always argue about if the girls can buy a drink or not, or if they should just get water. I mean, there's always this little argument about it. And the one daughter said, Dad, is it okay if we get a soda this time? And he said, oh, sure. And then the mom was like, no, we don't need to spend the money doing that. It's not necessary. And then like the whole dinner, he was going, cheap, 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 and just berating her in front of the kids, thinking that he's being funny, but that's not funny. What is that model to the kids? And he thinks it's okay because it's about money. So it's not, for some reason, we don't think that it's bad to argue and bicker about money in front of our kids, but it's just as harmful as arguing about anything else. It really does not model for your children what a healthy, loving relationship looks like.
Yeah, so agreed. There's a line of respect there in that story, right? And even if the intent is I'm joking about the money, you still shouldn't really do that. My wife and I have this agreement that we don't necessarily we will never disrespect each other in front of the kids.
Yeah, I love that.
Like I'll even ask my boys. I was like, have you ever heard me call your mom a name? Have you ever heard her call me a name? Have you ever heard like us dive in and, if she's doing something, even if I don't agree with it and vice versa, we have each other's back in front of them.
Yep.
Yep.
We could not agree with you more. We could not agree with you more.
Yeah, we're big on that. And,
Yeah.
but, going back to your book, this reminds me of the 5 love languages. And for the longest time, my wife and I couldn't figure out, like, I'm physical touch and words of affirmation. Surprise, surprise. Right. And then
you're doing a great job, by the way.
Right. Thank
Killing
you.
it, bro.
Thank you. Thank you. Give me a virtual hug now.
There we go.
So, my wife is quality time and acts of service. So like I could never understand, like, I'd go up to her, I'd hug her, I'd kiss her, all this other stuff. And sometimes I'd have an agenda and sometimes I wouldn't. And then I'd always be really complimentary of her. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me. I was like, man, like why is she not like digging this? And then she all the while she's like, you just don't understand me. And then all the while she's trying to love me with like quality time and acts of service. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool. All right. And so we weren't speaking the same language, but here's the thing. Here was the gap. We weren't even aware. Once we were aware, and I was like, oh, so she's quality time and acts of service. So when I pick up a dish and start doing the dishes, like suddenly, like I'm very attractive. And then, right. And then, same thing that she knows, like she's not a big complimenter. Like she wasn't raised in that environment where she got complimented a lot. So she's not a big complimenter. So, but she knows that I like to be complimented. So she goes out of her way she's like, hey, I know he likes that. I know she likes that. So we go out of our way. For you guys, it's the spender, the saver, the risk taker, the security seeker, and the flyer. And it sounds like, I mean, how refreshing would it be is like, okay, if I simply know which one of those I am, and I know there's a primary and a secondary, and if I know what she is, then I think a lot of the arguments would probably, I'm not saying it solved the problem, but at least you know who you're dealing with, and so does she.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, the knowledge is power. And Bethany had a mentor once that said to her, never stop getting a PhD on your spouse. And I thought that was so awesome because the reality is a PhD takes a lifetime to master. And so mastering, understanding our spouse is huge. But I even know in our relationship, so Bethany and I are both primary spenders. So we're huge gift givers. We love to give gifts. If someone needs something, they know who to come to. We're not shy about spending money. We enjoy spending money. That's not an issue. Our secondary money personalities, I'm what we call security seeker. So security seeker is that person that has to have the plan. Like when we go on vacation, I don't have any problem spending money on a vacation, but I've got every hour planned. I've even got like it planned down to, okay, between 2 and 3:30, we're going to take naps. I mean, I love a planned vacation because I don't like wasting time just bouncing around. Bethany, on the other hand, is her secondary money personality is a risk taker. So she loves the unknown. She loves just bouncing in and doing this. So our risk taker and security seeker used to butt heads like crazy. It butted heads with the kids. It really butted heads with business because she loves to grow a business and she knows that you have to take risks to do that. I'm a security seeker. That freaks me out. So when she would come to me with an idea, especially with the money component, I'd be like, yeah, I don't really see that happening. And so what happened in our relationship business-wise, she stopped bringing me ideas and our business really slowed down. And I think we started kind of growing apart when it came to our business. I think personally, she got to a point. So we went on the same vacation for 5 years in a row. Because I knew where everything was, I knew how to plan it. It was just a no-brainer for me. She finally sat me down and said, I'm either not going on vacation with you guys if you go here, or you're going to give me, the risk taker some experiences back. And I was like, man, I didn't even know that was an issue. So now we do 1 year where she plans the vacation, 1 year where I plan the vacation. And she's gotten me to do some crazy stuff that I never would have done before. So even in our business and our relationship, and it even affected our kids, we had those two secondary money personalities that were smashing into each other all the time. You can have a relationship where you have 4 different money personalities running into each other all the time. And that's why we have such a high divorce rate, and 70% of marriages end over money. When we found statistically, so we've had over about 400,000 people take our money personality assessment online. We've had 400,000 people take this assessment. 80% are married to their money opposites. That's pretty solid data in that we're our numbers are right on. So a 70% divorce rate over money was no big surprise to us, because we know 80% are married to our opposites. And so really understanding that, and it's just like what you talked about with the love language, really understanding, oh, if I want to make a date exciting for my wife, taking her to the same restaurant that we've been to 28 times, probably not the go-to place. Why don't we try something different? And if it's terrible, she loves the fact that it was terrible because we had never tried it before. It's not like the date was a total disaster. And so really understanding those money personalities, understanding yourself, but understanding your spouse is huge, because now I hear it through a different voice. When Bethany says, hey, I've got this idea, I know, okay, this is a risk-taking idea. You're a security seeker. Don't get the face. Don't roll your eyes. Engage and hear what she has to say. That feeds her. And as long as I can hear it, and then I usually say, do you mind if I go do research on this to see if this is a good idea or a bad idea? She's like, yeah, because she hates that. So she gets what she needs, that she's being heard, and I get what I need, and then I'm going to go out and do the research and then come back to her and say, these are my thoughts.
So let's just say we're talking to the audience right now. They go online, they take your assessment, they're like, oh, okay, this all makes sense to me. Like, the reason that I go in and buy premium unleaded gas is because I'm a spender, and I like to go in and buy myself and my wife, some goodies along the way, because it's kind of like my gifting thing, maybe even a bit of a flyer in there. But
yeah, huge flyer.
Right. So let's just say a guy takes the test, woman takes the test. I know for a long time, after Jessica and I read the book, the 5 love languages, we're like, okay, now what? So it's like, what do we need to do here to make sure your needs are getting met, that my needs are getting met, and how do we? Because I think the other thing too that's at play here is people always, they don't rise to any occasion, they fall back to their training.
Right.
So they'll always fall back to their default, no matter, even if they know the information. So it's, what is that? What do they do with the information?
Sure. Well, first of all, the book does help you understand each other's differences and work through some exercises with your differences. But we have a whole program that leads our listeners and our people who go through our program towards a magnificent marriage, because it first starts with the money personalities. Second, understanding and learning the language, each other's language, and we have some really cool tools for that. And then last, after that, after you really learn, so if you think about the 5 love languages, you kind of, you once a week you do something that's going to appease that person's love language. Same thing at the money personalities. Where normally I'd be like, I wouldn't maybe suggest that we go to the same restaurant. I'd say, you know what, honey, that restaurant you really like? Why don't we go to that one again? That would really appease to him. And then he may say, that's the thing that would appease to my risk taker. So some exercises to kind of really ingrain in your mind each other's money personalities, because even the love languages, you kind of tend to forget them after a little while. So you've got to do some things to really remember. And then last but not least, we have a 90-day system where you learn something called the money huddle, the money dump, and fighting fair. That's when you kind of round out the corner and really start seeing the magnificence inside of your marriage come alive.
I think a great example of that is what we call the money huddle. And what the money huddle does is it says, okay, how are we going to train ourselves to talk about money differently? And the way you do that is through regular money meetings. Now, some couples do them every week. I think that's a little overkill. I would say probably every other week or once a month is what Bethany and I do. And basically what we do is we teach couples how to go through the end process, evaluate, and that's evaluating where you currently are, end for needs, and then D for dream.
And using your money personalities to get there.
Right, exactly. So like I'm the security seeker in the relationship. I love to put together our cash flow worksheet for that month. So I get to sit down with Bethany and say, "Hey, here's exactly where we're at. Here's what we spent. Here's what, we need to keep moving forward. Here's what we made." And then the next part, needs. What are our needs going into this month? Oh my goodness, it's August, which means September is going to be crazy expensive because next to Christmas, September is the second most expensive month of the year for most families because of back to school. A lot of people don't know that. They don't plan for that. So then you've got this conflict in a marriage because it's like, you spent $700 at Target. How did you do that? Well, that's called back to school. So you've got to think about those things. And then the last one is dreams. And we teach couple how to start getting control of their finances so that they understand dreaming together is really important. Those first couple years when you were married, it was like one big dream. We're going to go to Europe. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to have this many kids. We're going to give to this organization. We're going to go on this missions, whatever. But what we find is that those dreams kind of go away. And so being on a united front is huge, and just training yourselves to have those regular money meetings is gigantic. And so not only are you halfway to the magnificent marriage that you want by just understanding that you have the power within you to really get these meetings and these things squared away, the stress just goes away. I mean, and we talk to people all the time, if you weren't fighting about money or talking about money, what else would you talk about? And people are like, I don't know. And how much time would that give you? And they say a lot. Great. That's exactly what you should be doing.
I heard a term not too long ago called financial intimacy. And it sounds like that's exactly what this is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, financial intimacy is the opposite of financial infidelity, which is, lying, cheating, hoarding money inside of a relationship. And that's because you both feel like you need to protect yourself. And if you can get intimate with it and understand each other and be real, wow, you'll just see your relationship will blossom because you're moving forward together in a united front, but in a way that you're both satisfied. Oftentimes the savers and security seekers in our society, frankly, they're much more praised than the spender or the risk taker or the flyer, just because they're kind of deemed as the responsible ones. And so what happens is that person feels very empowered to say, we need to save more, we need to be responsible, we need to da 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 da. Meanwhile, the other person who is, it's not wrong to be the way they are, they're feeling stifled. And so the freedom that it feels when a saver security seeker says to a spender or a risk taker or flyer, hey, let's put a little amount in our budget here so you can just do whatever you want. That's freedom. That's just allowing a person to be who they are and encouraging that versus trying to stifle it. And when you try to stifle another person in a relationship, that other person just naturally will just want to not be around you because you're attracted to people who who are for you. But when someone's against you, and especially when it comes to money, really, you'll feel like they're against you all the time.
That makes total sense. I love what you guys have outlined for couples. I want to get to kids, and I know
Sure.
we're kind of creeping up on the last little bit of the show. So I just took both my older sons on a rite of passage. I actually, you'll appreciate this. We hiked up Mount Quandary together.
Oh, very cool.
Very cool.
And then I read them a letter at the top of the mountain, and it was 7 pillars of transitioning from boyhood to manhood, and one of them was money management. So I vowed to them, I promised them, I'm like, look, as you grow up, I'm going to teach you about money. And we started that about a year ago. So we give them, and I'll be really transparent here, and I'm going to add some shock value that some of the audience may or may not know. We give our kids an allowance of $100 a month.
I love that.
Well, great. Most people are like, you do what? I'm like, well, wait a second. Here's what we do though. they are responsible for every financial decision that they make. So like my son's $20 haircut, he pays for that. My kids, if they want new shoes, they pay for that. The deal is that if they want to play a sport, we will pay for the club. But if you want to play hockey, you pay for your skates, and so it really helps these kids. Like, so for instance, my kids, they buy their own Halloween costumes, and the $65 Pennywise costume that my son thought he wanted. And when he started thinking about, like, wait a second, I have to get a haircut this month, or I want to buy my lunch at school for a couple times this week. I don't have enough money for that. So I'm going to buy this $40 one and be okay with it. And then he asks for coupons, like when he gets to the counter. So it's really training them to be better about money. But I want to take that even a notch higher. So the other night at dinner, I'm like, hey guys, would you like to earn, an extra piece of dessert tonight for a money lesson? And they're like, yeah, sure. I was like, well, we've talked about spending money and managing money a lot. What about making money and investing money? And then they're like, okay. So they each got their calculators out, and we had a dry erase board now. And so what we did was, I'll make this story quick, is we recently bought an investment home for a rehab project. So we funded a deal where we paid for a home, and then we charged an interest rate on that. And then my brother-in-law, who's the contractor, is flipping the home as we speak. So we literally wrote out the numbers. I was like, okay, guys, like here's what we paid for it. Here's the interest rate on that loan. Here's what that boils down to per month. Now, if he has the loan for 6 months, what do we make on that loan? And they got their calculators out and they got it. And I was shocked. And they're like, well, wait a second. So just by giving this money out, like, you're able to make this money? I'm like, yeah. And I was like, and your uncle, he is going to make this much money because here's what we put into the house and here's what he's put into it. And here's what we're selling it for. And you saw like these wheels turning, like, oh my gosh, like what if I, instead of buying something, I invested in something? And they were the ones doing the calculation, and they got a Kit Kat out of it, so they were happy. But how have you guys taught that? You have a boy in college, a son in college, you have another one who's a sophomore. What are the lessons you've taught these kids, and how?
Yeah, first of all, I will say that one of the things that we have stressed more than anything is knowing their money personalities. Because in that kind of scenario of what you're talking about, you'll get one son who's like, well, yeah, I'll get the $2 costume. You got the other son that doesn't naturally think that way. And so us understanding their money personalities has been so helpful. We have one son who's a primary risk taker, secondary security seeker. And we see that play itself out in every decision, almost every decision that he makes. It's amazing to us. Our other son is just like Scott, primary spender, secondary security seeker. So really learning, how to talk to them. We don't talk about savings accounts. We talk about future spending accounts because both of them don't have saver in them. That's just not the kind of, doesn't come naturally. So teaching them how to really use the way they naturally think to encourage them to do some of the things that they need to do. Teaching them that savings is not their natural MO. It's not their natural way of being, but they need to do it. So that has been probably one of our biggest things. Another thing that we've done that really was good for us was we started when they were very young talking about their car. And that we would, they had to save at least $4,000. We started this when they were young, like 6, 7 years old. And they had to save at least $4,000 for their car. And then we would match that because we wanted them to have a little bit of a nicer car. We didn't want, the junky car thing going on. So that was one thing that really, really worked for us. We've done investing, but I think starting off with who they are and their DNA and how they're made, it was really, really crucial. And it's really fun because they know the money personalities so well. They talk about other people. They talk about people they're dating and what their money personalities are and things like that. So, because like our oldest was dating somebody and he's like, wow, man, she is a master saver, man. She is saver on steroids. And then he gave us some examples. So it's I think really, really important to teach them the financial side of money, but also the relational side of money. So both of those things have been really instrumental, and I think help them and will help them for the rest of their life.
I think also we just have set a very clear precedent that when you turn 16 and you get your car, you will work. And so my youngest is a basketball and football player. So he works kind of between seasons. And then my oldest, who's actually a senior in high school, he's going into college next year. He's always worked. I mean, he is always, since he got his car, he worked at Chick-fil-A. He removed drywall after some flooding that we had in Colorado Springs for a summer. And then he washed windows this summer. And where I will encourage dads out there to really encourage their kids to work. And where I've seen that pay off was he was recently doing an interview and for a sports reality thing in Los Angeles. Cole was doing an interview and they were interviewing all these different kids. And he mentioned that he worked because the name of the show is going to be basically called The Grind. And they were talking about the kids' grind. You know, when do you lift in the morning? What do you do during the day? How do you eat? When do you lift at night? And Cole said, well, during the day, I'm at work for 8 hours. And the lady said, what? And she said, what do you mean you're at work? He goes, yeah, I wash windows, you know, as soon as we get out of weights, you know, from 9 to 6, and then we're back in the weight room at 7. And she, in the summer, and she couldn't believe that he had a job. And part of what I believe is something that a lot of parents are missing, but we have to instill in our kids, is that hard work ethic. So if you're talking to them about money, you're talking to them about their money personalities, and you are setting the very clear expectation that you will be working when you have your own car and you can get yourself there and back. I think that's kind of the trifecta for our kids. And I think we're probably less likely to have them living in our basements when they're 30.
No failure to launch scenarios for you guys in the future?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
They know when you get out of college, you're within reason, you're on your own.
Oh, no, definitely. And, you know, I think as parents, we have to start early because you don't want it. It's kind of like you can't just have one talk to your kids, especially your sons, well, girls too, but you can't have one talk about sex. You can't have the talk anymore. They are bombarded with all of these things. You can't just talk about it one time. You have to infiltrate it and look for opportunities to talk about it and how to be, you know, it's safe for marriage and all those kind. You have to talk about all that stuff constantly. Same thing with money. You're looking for opportunities to be able to teach them about money situations. You know, we'll show them our bills, like, you know, they're the cell phone bills and how they all work, and just taking real life situations to really train them versus, you know, a book, if you will. I mean, yeah, there's nothing wrong with the book, but they're really going to learn by life things that happen to really, really happen.
We were at dinner this weekend, and Cole asked us, okay, how do you guys get paid? And he was referring to the financial advising we do, which he didn't ask us what we got paid. That's none of his business. But he asked us, how do you get paid? And so Bethany and I were explaining to him how financial advisors get paid on assets under management. It's called AUM. So we took him through the process of AUM, took him through the different percentages, the different breakpoints, and he had his calculator out, and he was doing the interest, and his little brother was attached to his his shoulder at that point, trying to see how this worked. And the reason that we took them through that drill was exactly what you did with your boys. They have to understand not only the power of money, but they have to understand the power of making money, and then the power of doing good things with that money. And those are conversations that we're always having. I feel like parents that know their kids' money personalities, and the kids can take their money personalities for free on our website. We've got it broken down in the ages from
5 to 12. 13 to 17 and 18 to 25.
So have them take it, because and don't help them. I mean, maybe the 5-year-olds you're going to have to help a little bit, but let them take it, let them own that, and then just get an idea of how they think and what they think. My nephew, he is a freshman in college. I remember when we took him trick-or-treating 5 years ago with all the rest of the kids, I think he was in 6th grade and everybody else, he said, Uncle Scott, I don't even know why I'm out here trick-or-treating. I still have candy from last year. And my brain instantly knew he was a saver. And so talking to him differently than talking to the other kids, it just works differently. So I feel like with parents and dads, if we know how our kids are thinking about money, we can help them make decisions, and hopefully right decisions, not wrong decisions, even before they get close to making it.
I love that. I just want to recap a couple of things.
Sure.
I love that you talk about this as an ongoing conversation, because I think that there are a lot of things that we look at in life and they're like, okay, check the box, talk to them about that, we're good, talk to them about that. The other thing too is, my oldest is, I would venture to say, without him taking the test, he's heavy on the saver side because he likes a wallet full of money. And my 11-year-old is like, oh, I got my allowance today, cool, let's go shopping. And
Right. Isn't that
here's,
amazing how you
yeah,
can have all four of your kids could have totally different combinations.
totally different, yeah.
And it's so amazing to
Yeah.
us how, and we just too, it's really ingrained in you, in your DNA. And we have a way of showing that, but we won't go into all that here now. But just by the fact that you can have four kids raised in the same household
Yep.
and all four be different, it's amazing.
I agree. You guys got time for like one quick story? It's kind of funny.
Sure.
Absolutely, do it.
And I just had this aha moment as we're doing this show. So my 11-year-old, he's my spender, and we literally yesterday we went and got our haircuts, and we always go to the same place. He got done before me, and and he came into the little booth where I was in. I was like, "Hey, are you done? Did you pay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I paid." Didn't say a word. And then I go to the desk to pay for mine. She goes, "You're taken care of." And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "You're taken care of." And I was like, I don't understand. And she's like, "Your son paid for you." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I looked at him and I was like, "You paid for my haircut?" And he's like, "Yeah." And like, he just did it as like, "Yeah." And I was like, dude, I was like, my heart, man, is like so full. Wait, I don't even know what to say. Like, I was just blown away. I was like, that's like $25. And he always kind of busts on me a little bit. And he's like, well, someone's got to keep you looking all right, and so which was kind
Aw.
of funny. But yeah, I mean,
But
that's
he is a very, very, that's the thing that's so cool about spenders
Huge
is
gift
they are
givers.
huge and very,
yeah,
very generous.
And I'm
yeah,
so glad you didn't say, no, I'm paying for it. I'm glad you
You
let him
let him
have
do
that,
it.
right.
because that is so important to, that's why I tell guys that manage boards, so I sit on like 3 boards, and I look at all the money personalities, all the guys on the board. About half of those, if you have a board or you need to put a board together, make sure at least half the guys on that board are spenders,
Oh, yeah,
because they're going to move
yeah,
the organization
right.
forward faster, and they get, okay, what do we have to do to earn money for this organization? I love the fact you let your son have that moment. I think that's
Oh,
awesome.
that's so cool. We're going to use that story because that story is so powerful. Just
He,
showing that's just naturally who he is.
yeah, he's a good kid. Yeah, he can he turns my head into scrambled eggs sometimes, but overall he's a good kid. So before we head out of here today, I want to make sure that all the guys get connected to, I want to take this, I did all this
Yeah.
homework on you. I listened to all these shows. I read through your book a little bit, and I was like, dude, I didn't even take this test. I need to take this test, and I'm going to have my kids take this test. I think it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, so
where
fun.
can where can everybody find the test, and also to connect with you? I did go.
Absolutely.
I will have a link in the show notes for your Amazon, for the book on Amazon. But anything else that you want to share with us on how we can get connected?
Yes, if you go to themoneycouple.com, on there is the whole path towards a magnificent marriage, including the money personality assessment. And or you can go right there and just take the money personality assessment there. It's really neat, and it provides a 19-page report, so you can take it, your spouse takes it, you read it, and you just really learn about that person. It's a really great fun date night activity. And then also, if you go to themoneycouple.com and look under the parents section, all the assessments are there for your younger kids. We also have a book. It's the 5 money conversations to have with your kids at every age and stage. It's kind of like your Bible, if you will, about how to help your kids through learning the differences in their money personalities. And that's available as well.
We're going to have all your links in the show notes. And before we head out, I know you guys are on a hard stop, but I want to take a moment and honor you for something, because we didn't get to one thing, and I think it's tremendous. The crucible that you both walked through, and Bethany, you more so with wearing pink as a badge of honor. I heard that story, and I was so incredibly moved by it. And for you guys in the audience, make sure you go listen to other podcasts that Scott and Bethany have been on. They have a tremendous story of just resilience and overcoming, Bethany overcoming cancer. And just, it amazed me, like, Scott, just how you just sort of, you took some things that you could have, shared the burden with her on, but you were working with your United Healthcare, and you were just like letting her go get healthy again. And you were tackling a lot of that burden and that stress, along with trying to support her. And I love your message of like, hey, wear that pink with a badge of honor, and just your story of resilience, Bethany. Amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that with the world as well, because that's super powerful stuff.
Absolutely. So much. Dads and husbands can bring so much in a challenging time like that, and not all stand up, but Scott really stood up and helped me through it, and helped walk our whole family through that whole experience. So I'm really thankful to be here, and I'm thankful to still be married to Scott.
I'm thankful she's here too. I'd have been a disaster.
I tell my wife that all the time. I was like, God forbid anything ever happened to us. Like, I will just be a total mess. Like, there's just no going back to normal life. So, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. It's great to be with you.
You bet. So guys, that's all we got for you today. Head on over to gooddadproject.com/248 for all the show notes. I'll have all of Scott and Bethany's links in there, as well as the assessment, as well as their books. Also, today's show sponsor, YNAB. Go to ynab.com/dads to get your free 60-day trial. Guys, thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you.